I'm Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News. Today I'm here with Rep. Gabe Vasquez of New Mexico's 2nd District. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Cat.
Of course. So I just want to dive right in. You represent a very large border district in New Mexico. So what is the biggest issue facing your community? Are your constituents talking to you about?
Yeah, I think like many places in the United States, folks are concerned about the economy. They're really, truly concerned about their pocketbook, and being able to live the dream in this country, I think, is something that is slipping away from many of our families, making it into the middle, having the opportunity to live in a safe neighborhood, to be able to afford a home, to be able to buy health care, to be able to put gas in their car. Those are the top things that I hear about in my district.
And what about as it relates to the border?
Well, I think I'm uniquely positioned as a member of Congress in Washington, D.C., coming from Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. I actually grew up on the other side of the border wall, but I did have the privilege of being an American citizen. And I think I'm uniquely positioned to help lead conversations about everything related to border security and immigration, especially with our Democratic caucus. So right now, obviously, we have some challenges to face in this country when it comes to the influx of drugs into our country, into our neighborhoods. And, as elected officials, it's really our primary responsibility, and really for government in general, is to protect the well-being of our communities and our people. So poverty is a big issue. Right now, we are facing a crisis of addiction to fentanyl, and we are seeing obviously that this drug is being imported through our ports of entry, and that is a huge topic for folks in our border communities in terms of being able to stop that flow of fentanyl and taking some concrete steps to prevent the dangerous narcotics that are coming across our border. So I've been really focused on meeting folks on the ground, including Border Patrol, including local sheriffs, including our officials at the Customs and Border Protection Agency, to figure out how we can best tackle this issue.
Right. Of course, it makes sense. So you're talking about the fentanyl crisis because, as you know, you're calling for more funding for Homeland Security and Border Patrol in a letter that you've written to the House Appropriations Committee. So what specifically is in your proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, I led a letter urging Speaker Kevin McCarthy to bring, emergency legislation up for a vote in Congress so that we can address this crisis together. The letter requests $4 billion to order and streamline immigration processes. It also calls for about $800 million to address the flow of illicit fentanyl into the country. My letter to Speaker McCarthy calls for additional critical funding that happens right here in my district. I mentioned before that in the sanitary support of entry, we now have technology to be able to scan 100% of commercial cargo, which is where most of the fentanyl in this country comes through. It comes through our ports of entry. And so we need to be able to have both the resources with technology and the resource with additional funding for Customs and Border Protection agents to be able to operate the technology to inspect these shipments that oftentimes are carrying fentanyl or other illicit goods. So that's what my letter calls for. Over 20 Democrats that are part of the new Democratic coalition have signed on to it. I've spoken with many of my Republican colleagues about this while I've been in Washington, D.C., and they all agree that this is a problem that we desperately need to take care of. And so this letter is really an opportunity for Republicans to step up to the plate, work with Democrats, work with border legislators just like myself to better understand how we can help stop the flow of fentanyl, not make this a political issue, but actually address what is happening in our communities.
Right. So you've mentioned that there is some support, bipartisan support from both Democrats and Republicans. So as you hope to make progress with your proposal and just on border topics in general, where do you feel like there is collaboration with House Republicans?
Well, look, I serve on the committee, serve on a special task force that is looking at the reform of the H-2A visa program, which actually supports American farms in places like New Mexico and Arizona and Texas, all over the border, but as well as the country, to try to figure out how we can have a safe food system in this country that we are getting some support from Republicans on. I think we all agree that we need the labor to be able to have food security in this country. And so reforming the H-2A visa program is something that both Republicans and Democrats are working jointly on as part of a special task force in the Agriculture Committee. I think that is a sign of progress, and I think there's some really good members on there who are willing to talk about that. Now, when it comes to fentanyl and border security, I think one thing we can agree on as both Republicans and Democrats is that we need more technology at the border. We've and I've seen it here in my own district in New Mexico, representing 180 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border, that a border wall or a border barrier is not the most effective tool for keeping the bad things out of this country, whether it's human trafficking or drugs. I've talked to Border Patrol sector chiefs all across the border who all agree that we need more funding for technology. We need to be able to better understand what is coming through our ports of entry. And of course, we need to help solve this crisis that is at the border currently as it pertains to these illicit substances that are coming in. So I'm hopeful that Republicans will come to the table and work with me and other Democrats to actually solve this issue and not just make it a political issue.
Well, as you know, we are facing a looming government shutdown. So how does the fight to fund the government affect this whole conversation when it comes to funding the border and pushing for that new technology?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I can tell you, at least that I've done on my part. I introduced the Bipartisan Joint Task Force for Opioid Trafficking Act. That improves border security operations to detect, disrupt, and prevent illicit narcotics. I've got Republican support on that, so I'm hoping that Speaker McCarthy and other Republicans can take that up, all while chewing gum and trying to pass important appropriations bills. I'm also a member of the Bipartisan Fentanyl Caucus, and I've co-sponsored another piece of legislation called the Combating Illicit Xylazine Act, which is an additive that's being added to fentanyl that I also hope passes through Congress. And so the administration wants to do what it can, and it's actually requested a supplemental appropriations package to be able to tackle the fentanyl crisis. So I'm really hopeful that Republicans, and in particular Speaker McCarthy, will come to the table and work with Republicans to address this issue. Because I think the pain that families are feeling, the pain that communities like mine are feeling, are going to go unaddressed if we continue to make this a political issue. This is a crisis that requires bipartisanship. And so as we're going through, for example, the Defense Appropriations Bill or the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, that some of these important pieces of legislation that I've either introduced or co-sponsored are included in this package because they have bipartisan support, and that they also pay attention to what the administration is trying to do in supporting this effort. That's incredibly important. We got to work together on this. We got to put politics aside. We got to solve this crisis that's affecting so many people. I mean, over 150 people are suffering from fentanyl overdoses in this country every day. That's unacceptable. We got to work together.
So shifting gears a little bit to focus in on what the Biden administration has been doing as it pertains to the border. And when you were drafting this proposal, what did you find that you really liked about the Biden administration's policies? And is there anywhere where you actually disagree with the way that Biden and Mayorkas have been handling the border?
Well, look, that's a big question. And as somebody that grew up, again, other side of the border, somebody who's well positioned to inform my fellow Democratic colleagues on border policy, there is so much that we need to do to fix the immigration crisis in this country. However, there are solutions that work, that have worked for many years, that we can continue to support. But there's also critical reforms, especially when it comes to technology and border security. What I hear from Border Patrol agents on the ground who are manning the line is that they need more technology. That's why I'm requesting over $10 million in ASTs. They are essentially using AI technology, autonomous towers that help detect people who are coming across the border to be able to better serve Border Patrol. That's something I strongly support. I think this administration has done the best job it could with the tools that it has, but ultimately it is up to Congress to solve this situation. You know, Republicans had a chance over a decade ago to solve so many of these issues that we're facing today. And even though we had a Senate bill that passed in the Senate that was a bipartisan immigration reform bill, the largest that we've ever seen since the Reagan era, Republicans killed it in the House. And so if we want to get serious about immigration reform and how to solve the crisis that's happening at the border, I think Republicans have to be willing to work with Democrats on a solution that actually solves some of these crises. But it all comes down to funding and support, both for border security, but also for our immigration judges, for our immigration system. People need to be processed in an orderly way, in a humane way. And I think we can do that. But it would take away talking points for Republicans in the next campaign cycle if we actually got anything accomplished. And that is the most frustrating thing of being a representative on the border, is having the solutions, having the support, but having a Speaker of the House and an extreme right-wing Freedom Caucus that just won't work with us on this stuff.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like the border has become a very divisive topic with a lot of negative rhetoric coming from especially Republicans. So what is your reaction to some of them even calling for impeachment inquiries into Biden over the border? So how do you hope to continue to build consensus and combat these negative comments from Republicans about the border, especially being a border Democrat heading into 2024?
Well, I want to remind my Republican colleagues that Mexico is the United States' largest trading partner in North America, and we need to make sure that we are making friends with our largest trading partners and not making enemies. And so we have to take a much different tone of diplomacy when we work with our neighboring countries, in particular with Mexico, as we talk about immigration reform. What truly needs to happen is, one, we need to focus on what works. The technology to secure the border is incredibly important. That's what I've been fighting for since I've taken this office. And then second, places like in Doña Ana County, like Santa Teresa, that have exploded with trade and with jobs that are a bright spot for our economy, that are adding thousands of opportunities for people here on the border. We also need to support those issues, with our largest trading partner in Mexico. We need to make sure that we are making friends and not enemies across the globe. And in Mexico, we have some of the strongest friends that can help us support American jobs, that can help support international trade that is growing tremendously in my district. And that's something that folks need to recognize. And so I'm in Washington to make sure that the interests of our communities are represented. And also, I'm somebody that's been on the border on horseback, on ATV, in a Jeep. I've traversed almost 180 miles of the border in my district. And that's just because I love this place. I love this community. I know how tough it is for families that are seeking asylum and others to come into this country. But we do need some orderly process, a humane process, a fair process. And that means that we have to invest resources and stop politicizing the issue of immigration in order to actually make progress on this issue.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.